Call the meeting to order of the Leitchfield Utilities Commission for Thursday, February 1, 2024. You have been provided a draft of the minutes of our meeting on January 18th. If there are no additions or corrections, would entertain a motion to approve that.
So moved.
Motion by Pudgy, second by Greg. All in favor of that motion? Aye. All right. The next item is the bill list. Did anybody have any questions over the bill list? If not, I would entertain a motion to ratify that. Motion by Mr. Jones, second by Mr. Bernard. Any other questions about that? All in favor? All right. The next item is visitors, and we have with us representatives from HMB, professional engineers, and they have been drafting a regional facility plan for us. And I'm going to turn the floor over to Mr. Benton Hanson. Yes. Yes.
Okay. Yes. Thanks, Bob. First, I guess I'm going to talk about the kind of the process. Of course, this, like I said, is a facilities plan or regional facilities plan in y'all's case. And there's guidelines. There's like a 16-page document that the state has of what information, what the chapters are, sections are, all that kind of stuff. So we followed that very closely. You know, sometimes there are a few things you might say, well, it's in here twice and stuff like that. Well, it was exactly the way their format is. So just to keep that in mind. The process is at some point, the state doesn't mind when you submit one to them. You know, it's open all year long to submit one for review. But so what we need to do is go through a process of getting y'all comfortable with what information is in there, what assumptions are made, so then we can submit it to Division of Water. And the initial submission, they do a preliminary review to make sure all the information that they want in there is actually in there. And if not, they give us, we reply to their comments to add information to it, say if there's something missing. But they don't review it for what's technically in there as much as just what's meeting there, it's in there, you know, that kind of stuff, what information. So it's really, you know, the technical information that's in there and financial and all that stuff is purely up to what y'all want to see pretty much in the facilities plan. That makes sense. So once they review it, they give us comments, we respond, they say now it's good. Then they say you can have a public meeting. And so then we would schedule a public meeting with y'all. You got to advertise for so long. They got to have it on Division of Water's website for at least 30 days, things like that. It's a process that they want to follow very close, exact, as far as advertising and information. Where you advertise, it's on their website, you know, and everybody knows it. And so we have the public hearing. We take comments then. We'll also take written comments. We also take if somebody provided comments, and they might send it to you, might send it to me, might send it to the state. We find out if anybody got any comments, then we have to address them all. And then we put all this additional information in the facilities plan so it's documented. We also have to get a resolution. I don't know if y'all have to give a resolution maybe, but the city will and the county, because some of your sewers or you serve in your planning area is in the county. So even the physical court will have to pass a resolution just accepting the facilities plan. That's all they have to say, really. Of course, if they have any comments, some county physical courts want you to come and kind of explain to them what the document is and why and all that kind of stuff. Some don't. Depends on the judges as much as anything. Most of the time, judges are for, you know, all this kind of stuff. So it depends on your physical court. So once we have those resolutions, all that kind of stuff, we resubmit it to Division of Water again. They make sure that all this other added stuff that we had to get is in there, and if it is, then they prepare a SPEAR. And the SPEAR is just a summary document like 8 or 10 pages and figures and stuff of your recommendations mostly. Now, timing wise, I've had one in since since September, and they still haven't prepared the SPEAR because there's only like 1 or 2 people that review these. And if you're behind on the list right now, I just checked with them. There's 5 facilities plans that they have either to review or they're in the process of reviewing. And they haven't still gotten us a draft SPEAR, so they send one to you and one to me. We look at it and see if, hey, they put all the information in correctly. Then they publish the SPEAR, has to be on their website, advertised for 30 more days or so. Then once that's over, if nobody made a comment, then it goes back, and the commissioners, director of division of water, all that kind of stuff, there's like 4 or 5 people up the chain that has to sign this piece of paper. That takes a few weeks. So all this process, like once you submit till you finally get approval, might take a year. Now, this other one that I finished up last year, they're under consent decree, very much the same as y'all were. I actually emailed back and forth because I'm getting kind of frustrated that they haven't even got a draft and kind of moving it along. Some of it is because EPA, they review and they ask for projects like that and rank projects and all that kind of stuff for EPA. And so this one person, a lot of times, is doing that for a couple months, and we just are caught right in the middle of it. So they're going to do what EPA asks most all the time. And so I assume some of their funding is through EPA and all that kind of stuff. So it may take a year. Now, in the other case, they don't want to proceed on with design because they're in a deadline just like y'all and everything until the facilities plant approved, because they like to do things, you do this, get this approved, then you do that, get that approved. You can, and in several emails from the Division of Water said, well, you can go ahead and start design because that might take 6 months to a year to design and start that process, just as long as you don't get too far. And I don't know, I guess they'd have to have the facilities plan approved before they approve the plans. So you could get as far as having them submitted and they both be sitting there at Division of Water. Then there might be some emphasis for them to actually approve the facilities plan because, hey, but in this email back to me, it said, you can do that with design. I said, well, the utility doesn't want to do that. They want to do things what they think is the right way, and not jump ahead. Now, one thing I did talk to them in the corrective action plan, the CAP, is I added a couple years on their schedule when they first got it last summer. And so far we're okay, but if Division of Water keeps going, they don't have funding, and that's really a big unknown on how long it takes to get funding package together. And then it's fairly long, to do design. So you don't want to wait on one until another one finishes. But anyway, so you can see there, say if we submit Division of Water in 30, 45 days or something like that, if y'all had a chance, you're okay with it. Because if y'all want to change stuff, we would revise it. It might take us a week or 2 to revise it, depending on what it is, and get it to Division of Water. It'd be good not to let it sit too long before getting it to them and trying to get this process going with all their review, all these other things that go along with getting a facilities plan approved. Now, in front of you, what I have here is just, we did do a regional facilities plan in this one, where we looked at what the cost would be to connect Clarkson on and also Caneyville if it could be worked out, at some point. Now, no matter what, I agree with y'all that the flows from those places, since they're not a big portion of it, should be included in your calculations and all that kind of stuff. And I did make it where like Clarkson, so a lot of the stuff in the report is based on recommended plan, in which is usually your 0 to 2. And so only the treatment plant is 0 to 2, connecting Clarkson on. If that were to happen, I said would happen between 3 and 10, and Caneyville, if it were to happen, would be 11 to 20. So there are ways out, unless you wanted to do them sooner. I mean, you could always somewhat sooner. It's interesting, the legislature voted last year, I think it was last year, to start a fund to fund projects that regionalized water and sewer plants. Very specific. The only problem is they didn't fund it. There's no money in the funding for the fund. So, but hopefully maybe this term or maybe next year they will actually fund some money. So there's another potential place. You can talk to your legislatures and things about, hey, y'all enacted this. If we're going to connect, and we're building capacity for them, we're a regionalized treatment project and plant. And even before you connect them on, you might be able to get some money. Or they might help pay for, if it's agreeable, everybody pay for part of the funding for Clarkson to connect on or something like that. So just remember that there's always things, and that'll help your ranking of the project, even with KIA, even if you're not connecting them on right with that same project. But as long as there's some kind of commitment, maybe they might ask for some kind of commitment from the city and from Clarkson to, you're working it out. It might take some time to get funding and all that kind of stuff. And they can't connect on until your new plant's online anyway. I mean, Division of Water, if it was a dire emergency, they might let you, but since you're under, agreed order, then probably they'd rather you wait until it's online, probably. So this document here is just a review of what's in it. If you look on the second page, the purpose of the report is to help you. The big thing is help you qualify for funding for your project, but it's a roadmap, or it's just like a master plan. You think of a master plan or something. You use some past information, but you're trying to project forward, and nobody really knows exactly what's going to happen forward. You just try the best you can to know and be prepared for something unusual or maybe nothing to happen. So there's a balance there. Y'all would have maybe a better feel for like what might happen as far as industry stuff. Because from a flow standpoint, that's where there's the biggest jumps in capacity like needed for big industry that uses a fair. One thing about Bell is they actually don't use a tremendous amount of water on a daily basis. I've seen other industries, they use a decent amount, but not a tremendous amount. 150,000 gallons a day or something like that is kind of normal, is what I was seeing, with like the max 200,000 a day. So it's not a small amount, but it's not a big amount either. So I've seen smaller cities than you have industries that use 3 million gallons a month, which is like 100,000 a day, have one or two of them in town. So as far as your size town, it's not tremendous. But so what we look at existing conditions. Of course, all this is just wastewater system. We have to do a little evaluation of the collection system as well. We forecast future conditions, and then we determine alternatives and we make evaluation recommendations. This planning area boundary on sheet 3, it kind of shows, it might not be the most current if they've annexed any of the city, but it's what we could find that's more recent, showing the city limits are blue and the planning area is red. Now, this is the same planning area that was done in 1997 when your last planning, but the only growth we saw potential would be toward Clarkson. Of course, their city limits are right up to there, so we couldn't change the planning area right there without their acceptance. They don't have to be, for you to accept them, they don't have to be in your planning area necessarily. So what they would get is NOSP or NIOP or something like that, where there's an agreement between the city and the utility to accept their wastewater and treat it for them. they have to have that permit. So there is a permit form process they have to do. It's pretty simple and straightforward for them, so it's not as hard or as much information as a KPDS permit. So you'll see there, and it kind of identifies also the location of the wastewater plant. The purpose kind of the report again is we included some of the information that was in 1997, especially on the collection system. We have to address what was in the agreed order, which is really the wastewater plant treatment and those violations. And it qualifies you for funding. Even RD will accept facilities plan instead of having to do a preliminary engineering report. Now, they might have to, like where you calculate rates, they might require you to do that paperwork that they require on how they calculate that. But as far as this a preliminary engineering report itself, you probably won't have to do. And we use the guidance document checklist to follow. Existing treatment or existing conditions at the treatment plant is, I'm sure y'all know, the newer part is 20 years old or a little bit older. The old part that you still rely on a great bit is over 40 years old. I think it was completed construction in about 1981. So, you know, your treatment still relies on a lot of old processes, and the size those processes were from 40 years ago. And of course, you've had exceedances on your KPS permit, and I said regionalization is being considered. So if you look on page 6, we have a map, and we'll have maps in the facilities plan showing you existing sewer map, and stuff like that. Then the next page is, then we kind of show the existing treatment plant, and then we show like what was built in 1980, what was built in 2001 or 2 or 3, and then what part of the plant's not used anymore, really because of the lagoon system. That's why a big part of that plant, or it just doesn't work because it's not big enough, really, for what you're trying to do. So that's like the tan color. And then we forecast future conditions on page 8. So we try to project future population for people in your planning areas. So there's no, you know, that's kind of a hard exact science because we get out in the county and trying to forecast, you know, flows. Like I said, industrial flows are by far the biggest potential. We also look at the large users, land use changes or stuff like that, or what the current land use is. So from all that information, we try to predict flow and loading conditions. We also have to talk about inflow and infiltration. That's one of the things they want you to talk about. And then we try to then determine what the treatment plant capacity should be. Now, if y'all want to look at the potential for either making the recommendation where it's a bigger plant, or where you make it where, hey, if we did a plant a certain way, we could build another one of those and add capacity in the future, you know, as you actually solve things moving forward. Right now, your current flow averages, like on a yearly basis, like 1.5 million gallons a day, whereas this is a 3. So at startup, you know, if nothing changes in the next few years, you'll be at like 50% flow-wise. But from a loading-wise, you might not be quite that much, but you'd be close to that much spare capacity left. Now, you don't want to get up over, like, I think I said 87%, somewhere between 85 and 90%. You don't want to get up past that before you start planning again and thinking about, you know, expanding the plan or something like that. So on evaluation of alternatives, I did include in this report, just in case, you know, y'all doing the bypass pump station and force main. I include that as the collection part, and that's where your need is far as the old O'Neill Smith pump station you're taking out of service, that was ranked the lowest in your system. So I put this in here. Now, I didn't calculate it in rates or anything like that because y'all, in talking to Dwight, or y'all got monies to fund that, pay for that. So it's not included in the rates, but it's included in the report as recommendation, just the way the state wants to see it. So then I also looked at 3 different alternatives on a treatment plant, and the differences are, the first one has a plant where you're reusing the old lagoons at equalization only, and everything else is done with a new piece of a plant. And the key point is, what do you do with the solids? Well, in this one, we're dewatering, and I called the landfill and got landfill costs and all that stuff. You're dewatering and hauling it to the Ohio County landfill. And so that's a big, and if you see in there, and if you look at line items, you'll see I had an increased O&M cost once the plant went on. And like 2/3 of that was dewatering and hauling and paying tipping fees. So that's alternative one, and that's my recommended one because it's the most guaranteed. Hey, this is work. It might be a little bit more costly, but I'll get into alternative 2 is kind of doing a little bit different type process. It's a process that y'all aren't familiar with, whereas alternative 1 is oxidation ditch. That's what y'all went and looked at. It's very operator friendly. It's also it's flexible in its treatment. The alternative 2 had what they call a sequencing batch reactor. The treatment is the same as the other one. It's a little more complicated to operate, have a lot more automatic controls, things like that. It's a heart, so that's alternative 2. It also costs a little bit more than what 1 did, that process. The other one is alternative 3, which again is the same biological treatments, exactly the same as 1, except instead of dewatering and haul sludge to the landfill, I'm saying that y'all can waste it into your lagoons for so long. Now, when doing that in the cost, you'll see I added more money in for cleaning out the old lagoons and things like that. So, you know, there is a balance there. Construction costs is a little bit more, but not, if you'll see, that they're not a lot more, $1 million or $2 more total. But your O&M cost would be a little bit less, but I didn't recommend that, and because it's a little bit less certain that all that'll work out just the way you hope. And so what I think, in alternative 1, what I did was, usually, you know, when you're getting a 3 MDD plant, usually you have 2 dewatering devices. So if one went down, you'd have another, just like a pump station. In this one, I didn't do that. What I said was, as a backup, if a piece of equipment went down and you were trying to get it fixed, so you could still get rid of solids out of your treatment system, you could always waste it in the lagoon as a backup. And I think no matter what you do, you can do that. In the recommendations I made for recommending alternative 1 was, I feel like before you get in design, or right at the very beginning of design, 2 things, you need to do 2 things. Is 1, try to determine how much solids you have in your lagoons. And what that does is tell you, at least for the equalization, is, and what they do now is they can fly drones over water, and companies develop this sonar type system, and they do this in Florida, where they've had a lot of hurricanes that dump a lot of stuff in treatment units, and so nobody knows, you can't take it out of service, so you don't have to take it down for but like 30 minutes. They fly the drone over it, and they provide information that shows how much solids and kind of where they're at in your system, in the lagoons. And to do that, because I think you might determine, hey, dang, that's part of our treatment problem, is there so much solids? Or you might say, well, in a few areas, yeah, it is really accumulated, but overall it hadn't been. Hopefully it's something like that, where you might be able to draw the water down, suck out, like with a Vector truck, some of the solids, and then put it right back in service. one of the problems with trying to say you're going to use that and only that is that that's a big part of your treatment. So you can't do anything much with it other than determine what you need to do until the new plant's up and running. So it's kind of a chicken and egg kind of thing. So if it's a backup or equalization, you can deal with it after the new plant's built, right after that, a lot easier. So you got to think about those things sometimes. The other thing is the lagoon is leaking. And doesn't seem, the leaking's enough where even like this dry period, from what I understand from Ricky, is that it still was wet down on the, and if you think about that lagoon, like half of it or close, a little less than half of it is about ground level. And then the lower half, you know, is almost sticking fully out of the ground. And so there's a lot of pressure on that lagoon by the water level to leak. But, in looking back at the old plans when they designed it, underneath the clay layer there's some like rock filters that come out, and you can see on the aerial, if you look at it close enough, you can kind of see like there's drainage and how the ground might be at times brown, where it looks like drainage is going down toward the creek, you know, where it's on the high side. So it was made to drain out any kind of leakage in a kind of uniform, manageable way. And so I did some investigation and talked to a geotechnical engineer about, well, how can we reduce the leakage? You know, I would never say you could always stop leakage from a lagoon. There's no, unless you just put a liner in. The problem with that is trying to get all the solids out, and then you end up with muck. You got to then get in there with a dozer. I've done this before. Get in with a dozer, load the muck up as best you can, and haul that, or put it somewhere where you can spread it out and dry it out. So it's a very involved process to totally 100% clean it out. And if you put a liner in there, that's what you basically got to do. Well, there is some fixes where that the geotechnical said he's seen people do. People with farm lagoons do it a lot, and also some other lagoons, you know, wastewater lagoons and stuff, where you can buy 3,000 pound like sacks of bentonite clay. And if you drop, in your case, drop it part way down, you can dump that clay in there, and you can pay for a lot of these 3,000 pound sacks, you know, maybe $1 million worth, and possibly greatly reduce, you know, how much that leaking is. Because that's really what you're just trying to do anyway, is get it to last for another 20 or 30 years or so, and not totally 100% prevent leakage and stuff. Just because, you know, you want to plan for something that you can manage, not unknowns. And so it'd be good to do a detailed geotech and get their recommendations on some. But I think at least we have a way of potentially, and cost of potentially doing. I think I had, like on alternative 3, I had 1.3 or 1.5 million to try to do this, reinforce what clay layers down there with some more clay that you can kind of dump. Maybe not from the high surface, but maybe part way down, get in there and dump and try to prevent it from leaking quite so much. But it shouldn't be, I wouldn't think right now it's eroding your levee away, but that's what the geotech, just because of how uniform and how it looks, that the leakage is very channelized from underneath the clay layer now that they have, that drainage system. And so, but you need to determine from a geotech if that levee's starting to have issues structurally or not. That's really the key there. So that's a lot about those. You know, they make us do cost, and then we do present worth analysis of it. And then they also make us do non-monetary factors, and they tell you what factors those are. So I kind of go through a little matrix, and then you do some multiplication and division and see which is the recommended or lowest one. Hopefully when you do that, you kind of know which way is the most conservative that, for the utility. On the recommended alternatives there on that page 10, I did the bypass pump station, Clarkson and Caneyville on the collection system. And then I also looked at the wastewater plant upgrade. So on regionalization, all I did was construction cost. I didn't get into big evaluations of present worth and all that kind of stuff because it's not in the 0 to 2 project. Page 11, the Clarkson pump station, all I did was assume, hey, we're going to go down the highway somehow, 62, and around the bypass and come into the 24-inch interceptor down by the parkway because I wanted to get as close to as big a line as I could. And so if it's agreeable at some point, one thing we didn't do in this is a real detailed analysis of what the route would be and all that kind of stuff until you know, hey, we want to see if we can make this happen. Then you should do a little investigation and determination on route, solidify the size that I have in here, the size force main, things like that. So just to reinforce what it should be. And then on the next page is the Caneyville pump station. Of course, that's a good bit further away. It's like 13 miles or something like that, whereas Clarkson line was about 6 miles. And actually, I looked at USGS maps, kind of determine how much up and down. It would take 3 pump stations, submersible type pump station, to pump it back to y'all. So the cost was a good bit more than just the line length, but 2 more pump stations to try to pump it back. So Caneyville's not such an easy thing. It's not to say it couldn't be done. I've done one 12 miles before, had 2 pump stations on it, and it's worked now for about 15 years. So, so it's not impossible to do, but it's a good bit bigger cost to do that. Then if you look at page 13, this is the recommended alternative, and if you see, the old plants on the left side. We would abandon pretty much all the old treatment processes from 40 years ago. The only process we're going to use is the lagoons, especially the EQ. Depending on what we discover, we might use the whole lagoon as EQ. But I didn't want to assume that right off the bat till geotech and we find out how many solids, all that kind of stuff. But you'll see on the right side, the green is, and this is, semi to scale, so we could kind of see how it would fit on there. And of course, the new plan. It would include I assume new administration building, a new lab, oxidation ditch and clarifiers, sludge holding tanks, and solids dewatering system. And then of course you'd have disinfection, post aeration, and discharge. So we'd have to run a pipe, and I didn't really show any of the pipes, down to the creek from the plant. You'd have one there to discharge. Now, when you get in design, hopefully the floodplain is, and you can see on this picture here where the leakage is and where the discharges are on the bottom side of those lagoons. Those are where it all drains out, and that's what it showed, on the old plans. It kind of goes around the sides a little bit, so you can't really, so it must not leak around the sides as much as it is on the bottom. But it'd be nice to stay out of the 100-year floodplain. It's not to say you can't construct it in the floodplain. You just have to do it up far enough where you're above certain levels of the flood. And you would right there, but on their map, the FEMA map that shows floodplain stuff, they show the border, and in the facilities plan you can see it because we put those FEMA maps, 2 of them in there, of how close it comes up to the fence where the current fence is. And so you would want to make sure whatever you do, if you do anything outside the fence, of course you revise the fence, you stay out of the floodplain so you don't have to deal with revising the floodplain map or getting It's just one less permit potentially from the floodplain people at Division of Water. So that's kind of just a general summary of the report. Look at the report, and like I said, y'all got 3 copies. And y'all can write in there, y'all can do anything you want in there.
Laura, this is the full report here of the draft. I mean, what he's gone over is just in this little summary, but that kind of gives you an idea of the information that's contained in it. And like I said, appreciate the effort that you've put into this so far, Benton, and like I said, we just have to move forward and onward to keep it pushing along.
Well, like I said, if y'all want me to come back and after y'all had a chance to look at it and think about it, we can certainly do it, whether it's at a meeting or some other time. So just let me know. And,
well, we do need a little bit of time to digest this, but again, I think we need to, from our standpoint, need to keep moving forward. So we can't, I don't know what a realistic time to follow up with you on, because we need to get this submitted to the Division of Water. I mean, ideally, what would you think as far as submission?
I would guess if we say meet in 2 weeks, then in like 2 weeks after that, we could submit. Unless there's major changes or something we got to go back through and do, and then it'll only take a week or 2 more, probably, or something like that. There is just a little bit of information that we've had issues with that we need to include. And the main one is the Corps of Engineer has never responded to us. In the past, they've always been very quick about responding back. And one of the things is crosscutters. And so we have to contact U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Kentucky Fish and Wildlife, Corps of Engineers, Heritage Council, and Natural Resource, which is like if you're going to build a new plant in a field or farm field or something like that. We got everything back and very timely, and usually the Corps is very timely, but they won't even respond to us when we email them right here recently in the last 2 months. So so we're going to have to try to call and find the person versus email. And in the past, they've always wanted to email, so we're a little hesitant on just calling out of the blue somebody, but we might have to try to do that to find out why they haven't even responded.
We'll make sure we hear back something, get in touch with somebody before the next time we meet.
I mean, it might be somebody's retired or quit or something, or they've transferred him doing something else. Have you? Okay. So, we just don't understand.
Well,
So we have to have that in there when we submit it, or it'll be a comment, and they'll ask for it to be in there. And so then we're kind of waiting on the Corps anyway.
I'd say we need to study this. I mean, we have a meeting on the 18th of February. That's 2 weeks. Or 15th. It's the 15th of February, excuse me. And so we need to have this studied somewhat by then, and at least, get, if we have any questions or comments, and then I guess, I mean, is 1st of March a good time, do you think, to get this submitted to Division of Water? Anybody? I mean, from a technical standpoint, I mean, I know that you've been working with Ricky and Dwight, and y'all have made some trips, and I mean, this is kind of along the lines that we've been talking about all along. I don't know that I'm going to sit here and have a lot of technical comment about it or anything like that, so.
Now, the option wouldn't have to be selected before it's submitted to the facilities plan. That has nothing to do with which option that we go with, does it?
Not really. The biggest thing is that if y'all wanted to go, say, with option 3 or change later to do option 3, since most of it's the same other than sludge handling, is you could probably, if it's as long as you revise it before we submit it we'd have to include in the public hearing what it actually is. So you have a little bit of time between now and when you do the public hearing to revise. But you'd have to, in the next few months, do something with determining if you want to try to use the lagoon for waste and sludge in.
I think as much research as we've done to this, I think option one is the way I'm going to recommend that we go to the commissioners. I don't see that changing. I was just curious as, if that would affect the facility plan or not.
I guess my only question about option one is, and you're talking about hauling, is
Yeah.
to make sure the long-term availability of that. That's something we'd have to be comfortable with.
Well, see, that's not such an easy thing until you've done geotech. Make sure the
Yeah.
levee's structurally fine. Can we kind of slow down the leaking? And then how much volume of sludge is in there? Like I said, if it's fairly
Yeah.
full, then you might say, you can get a better cost knowing kind of the quantities. We've gotten some cost from two different people to kind of do slightly different things as far as removing solids out of it. But it was all just on kind of seat of the pants guess of what that quantity was.
But your process by
Quantity.
doing that, by taking those solids out and hauling them off, I mean, how often a procedure is that? How often you
Well,
take it
that's-
to Ohio County
We,
landfill?
if you, we did investigate to see how much is in there, we would then try to determine how much per year you would put back in it, and how long would that take you?
All right,
And again, it's making some assumptions all along the way,
yeah.
but that's when we could do something like that, so.
Well, thanks again. I think what we'll do is put this on the agenda for 2 weeks from tonight to see if we've got any questions, and that way it'll be at a public meeting and all of us here. And then we'll probably try to give you an agreement to go ahead and submit the thing. Again, we all realize that it could be revised, but, I mean, this
Yeah.
is a long, slow process, but
It is.
it doesn't get done unless you take steps.
That's right. And like I said, you can probably revise the report. They might have to look at it again. If you're doing nothing on their checklist other than revising what you're constructing, as long as the cost estimate and description is comparable to what's in the public hearing, then that's what's got to follow then, unless you do some kind of
Yeah.
amendment. I don't know what the state, they probably let you go back and revise it but you might be, not starting over, but it might be, you have to go back through kind of their preliminary review. And in my past, the preliminary review's been fairly quick, most of the time, but the main person, there's only one main person, and she is who I'm trying to get to write a spear, and so I know and I got a long letter from the visual email today saying why they can't always get to it because of these EPA commitments they've made, so.
All right.
I complained kind of as much as I felt like I could without getting them too mad, so I don't want to do that either.
Well, thank you again. Does anyone have any other questions or comments?
Well, I sure appreciate y'all giving us this time and everything, and we enjoy working with y'all, and like I said, just let me know if they have any comments even before, if you want to send them to me, or if you
All
want
right.
to wait till the next meeting.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Next item of business, is there any unfinished business that we need to take care of before we move on to new business? Under new business, at a recent city council meeting, Councilwoman Haycraft has requested to have a postcard in the next few billings for customers to update telephone numbers. I did speak with the office staff and with Lori, and rather than try to undertake a manual stuffing of each envelope, if it's put on a piece of paper, our machine that actually loads the bills into the envelopes can do that. And Alicia's kind of fixed up something along that, so that would be my recommendation that we do it that way, because it really wouldn't add any cost to us to do it that way. But it would take a pretty big manual operation to do a separate card
Yes, it
that's a
would.
different size. And that's your recommendation, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Is there a motion to go ahead and have included in our bills that we send out, a request to update customer information, telephone numbers. Motion by Mr. Jones, second by Mr. Bernard. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. The next item is an approval to pay an invoice from David Strader for electrical work done at the Levette Street lift station in the amount of $350. And the reason we do this separately, rather than just the bill list, is, of course, David is married to Robin that works at the wastewater treatment plant. And I'm assuming that, we just need to make that in the minutes. There's no procedural thing. So is there a motion to go ahead and approve that bill? Motion by Mr. Bernard. Is there a second? Okay. Second by Mr. Alley. Any discussion? All in favor of that? The next item is suggested new gas installation rates. Dwight, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, Brad brought it to my attention that we were losing money on a lot of these, our meters have went up in price, and I told him to come back with a recommendation, and this is his recommendation, that'll cover our cost on gas installations.
So I guess these are model numbers and size meters.
They're the size of the gas meters.
Yeah, so an AL 250, currently we charge $300 to take that to $350. An AL 425 from $600 to $675. An AL 630 from $1,150 to $1,350. An AL 800 from $1,400 to $1,950. An AL 1000 from $1,800 to $2,475. An AL 1400 to remain cost plus 10%, and an AL 2300 to remain cost plus 10%. And basically all those latter numbers are pretty good sized meters for big users.
They're rarely used.
Yeah, really. So,
Basically, this is more of a material thing than increase. It's not a labor thing.
Right, it just, our meters have went up.
Okay. I
We
just
were-
wanted to clarify that.
We were selling them below cost, apparently.
Yeah.
Trying to make it up in volume.
is there a motion to adopt the new gas installation rates for those size meters? Motion by Mr. Bernard. Is there a second?
I'll do it.
Second by Mr. Jones. Any discussion? Comment? All in favor?
Aye.
These are effective immediately, correct?
Yes. February chamber luncheon will be February the 8th. Plan to attend, let Lori know by Monday. The Personnel Committee meeting is February 5th at 5 p.m. to begin working on updating the personnel policy. And of course, that was, brought to us in Brad's thing, one of the comments that he'd received. So we need to make sure we're getting that updated.
Yes, I want to comment on that too. Do you all want to select somebody to sit on that? Because we're going to be revamping the whole policy. And one of the first things that we do need to do, like Brad said, was get that drug policy in there for the gas part. So
You've previously done that, haven't you, Keith? Anybody have any problem with Keith sitting in on that committee? I'll appoint Vice Chairman Jones to be a part of that committee.
thank you.
You have the December 2023 financial statement included in your packet. That's for your review, and we'll approve that at our next meeting. Please do that. Anyone else have anything else? Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Jones to adjourn, second by Mayor Miller. All in favor? Meeting adjourned.